Looking back, what I said about Hyrule Castle was ironic. It was completely dwarfed by the massive volcano that overlooked all of Hyrule. You might be thinking that it was dangerous, maybe even foolish, to have a settlement so close to an active volcano. Truth be told, the mountain was probably the reason why Hyrule was so lush and fertile. The people of the land never had to live in fear of a cataclysmic eruption. It was said that those that held the spiritual stones had certain magics that could keep their respective areas in check, much like the Deku Tree had done for the forest in the Lost Woods. While he kept the dangerous predators and monsters at bay, the Guardian of Death Mountain was able to calm the volcano and keep it from erupting. And in case of emergency, when the Guardian's powers had faded, the denizens of the mountain could easily prevent any lava flow from reaching Kakariko. Though I look back now, and I see it as a looming reminder, Hyrule Castle was always sitting in the shadow of death. It would only be a matter of time before this all changed. Gorons, hardy mountain folk made of stone. They can live in harsh conditions, they will withstand the most extreme temperature environments. Death Mountain has many runoff tunnels for magma and lava flows to prevent a catastrophic flow dug by the Gorons. I find it strange that the developers decided to make the Gorons so well-informed. I remember what really happened. All they knew for sure was that there were rumors that extinct creatures had been seen in the cavern after the Gerudo man had arrived. But before anyone could investigate, the cavern was blocked off by the boulder. Each one of them assumed that the armored man had done it. Needless to say, knowing that Ganondorf had been here easily got my attention. Goron City was a bit too claustrophobic for me. Someone raised in the forest all my life, I didn't quite enjoy being underground, but it's what I had to do. Seeing Goron City in its heyday was quite the sight. The whole city was lively, like a nightclub. The game has a rather childish sense of humor. I know what you're all thinking right now. If they eat rocks, how can they be starving? They're literally surrounded by rocks. The game plays it off like they're high-class gourmets, but that's not the truth of the threat posed. While they did have stores of food they could eat, their production was down, not only for their stores of food, but for their product. All explosives in Hyrule are produced on Death Mountain using the Goron's special crop. Ganondorf was making a preemptive strike, cutting off Hyrule's supply of weapons for when he made his move against the royal family. But more than that, the severe threat posed was that the creatures in the Dodongo Cavern were dangerous, vicious carnivores, and nocturnal. With Kakariko Village literally just down the slope, if those creatures got out and continued to spread, Hyrule could easily be overrun by them. If the situation wasn't dealt with, everyone would be in danger. I bet you're thinking that maybe I should have joined a circus. I didn't even know what a circus was back then. At least not yet. the sacred gem that represents a symbol of divine magical authority, one piece of the task set down by the goddesses themselves to test all of Hyrule, and these people wanted to eat it. Yeah. When I first met Darunia, he wasn't just standing around waiting. He was reviewing maps of the Dodongo Cavern and drawing up plans on exactly what could be done about the situation. He was busy and stressed out. He was always a bit hot-headed, but he wasn't one to lose his temper at a child. He easily held himself back, despite his frustrations. He was irritated that King Leonis, Zelda's father, hadn't yet sent any word about reinforcements to deal with the situation. Ganondorf was keeping the king distracted, shall we say. He was easily dismissive and not believing that a kid like me was the answer to his problems. I was confused. Did these people know what a forest is, or didn't they? Regardless, hearing that made me nostalgic for home, but it felt like it was so far away from here. I was disheartened. I didn't know what to do. For the first time since I left the forest, I felt small, like a kid not knowing where to turn. That is, until I talked to this Goron, and that's when I realized the tunnel behind him smelled like the forest, and the sounds coming from it. It sounded like the forest, too. Specifically the song that Saria would play on her Ocarina. I couldn't believe that I would be hearing this all the way up here. After I got through the barrier, I followed the tunnel downward for what seemed like a long time. And before I knew it, I was back home. I decided to follow Navi's advice and talk to Saria. She'd be the only one willing to accept that I was back here. I did want to see the look on her face when I told her that I was going to save the world after all. The problem was, once I was back in the forest village, I couldn't find her. The only people about were those who were surprised to see that I was still alive. Fortunately, they gave me clues as to where to go. The Lost Woods were a touchy subject for us Kokiri. We all knew that it was where the monsters came from, and we knew what would happen to us if we got lost. But for some reason, Saria was never particularly afraid of them, and, well, her confidence gave me courage enough to go in there. Mido was always a bit sore that we had a special hangout place in the woods, just the two of us. Fado took a particular interest in the place as well. Needless to say, I knew where I had to go to find Saria in the woods. The problem is, I didn't know how to get there on my own. But then I remembered Ghiborah's advice, follow the tune, and when I started listening for it, I could distinctly notice that across the various twists and turns through the forest, the song became louder and louder. And before I knew it, I was there. To my surprise, however, the meadow's maze was blocked off with a gate. Now I was beginning to get worried. The woods had been changing more and more since the Deku Tree's death. To this day, I have no idea how she got past the Wolfos and the Mad Scrubs on her own. I guess Saria just has her own way of doing things. I wonder how much Saria knew. She might look like an unassuming child, but that's far from the truth. So I can't help but think that maybe she was in on it from the very beginning. It's something that I didn't get the chance to mention before, but when I left the forest, Saria made me promise that one day I'd return home safely, and that no matter what happened while I was out on my journey, I would never forget her. It's ironic. How much of that promise was I not able to keep? Skull Kids. They served as a reminder of what would happen to us if we got lost out here, much like the Stylechilds. They weren't particularly dangerous, but they were known for being a mischievous bunch, a slight bit malicious. They were known for knocking out unsuspecting travelers and robbing them. Most of us Kokiri tended to avoid them, but in this situation I had wanted to try something. And needless to say, well, this particular Skull Kid, he and I would have business to attend to later on. At the end of it all, I didn't mind having fun with the Skull Kids, but still, I was ominously reminded that if I stayed in the woods for too long, I'd end up just like them. So I wasn't anxious to stay any longer. After I had gotten out of the woods, I had completely forgotten about the secret tunnel back to Goron City. It didn't bother me too much. I decided to use the opportunity to visit other places I had missed on my way to Castletown. Lon Lon Ranch always had a sort of quiet dignity about it. Something so serene and peaceful about raising animals. I could easily see myself doing it for a living. Yeah, without a doubt, it was one of my favorite places in Hyrule to visit. Ingo. I didn't think much of him in my youth, even though, in a way, he was right. His methods were cruel and wrong, but he was still right about Talon. At least, for right now he was. Years from now I'd grow to sympathize with Ingo's plight, especially when I learned who he really was, and his true relationship with Talon. It's tragic, really. I was a kid back then, and I still didn't know much about such things. Still, what if? Seeing a horse up close for the first time was a strange experience. They were these large and powerful, majestic animals. They were incredible, a sight to behold. This isn't how any of this went down. Truth be told, this wasn't actually the first time I had seen or encountered Epona at all. I did learn the song to tame her from Milan, but the horse wasn't here at Lon Lon Ranch. Epona tended to stray every now and then, and this time she'd wandered off. She made it all the way to Kakariko Village, which is ironic considering that in the game she's not even allowed to go up there. The local farmers there had found her and were going to bring her back to the ranch when Epona managed to slip away from them. She was a bit of an unruly one, makes her so hard to tame. She managed to make her way all the way up Death Mountain Trail, and that's where I found her. You see, the way it really happened was that the road to Dodongo's cavern was very difficult to traverse. So after I found Epona and managed to calm her down, I was able to use her to ride to the cavern entrance. Sloppily, I might add. It was the first time I had been on a horse. She was essential for defeating the creatures on the inside, but I don't fault the game for this change. They needed to make it more exciting. Either way, the experience resulted in me and Epona becoming lifelong friends anyway, even after I brought her back to Lon Lon Ranch. It was a good thing, too, considering that those who were watching me at the time realized that she would be a considerable asset to me. Anyway, I finally had what I needed. I didn't quite know if it was going to work or how Darunia was going to react, but I knew I had to try. I certainly wasn't expecting this. I think that Darunia was mostly being sarcastic when he told me to do that, but he did admire my courage when I said I would. But while Saria's song managed to cure his depression, it didn't ease his conscience. He decided to confide, in me of all people, what the situation really was. The truth is, the Dodongos were ancient predators that had long since gone extinct. Ganondorf threatened to bring them back to life if Darunia didn't hand over the spiritual stone of fire to him. When Darunia refused, Ganondorf made good on this threat, reviving the ancient species. But it wouldn't make sense for him to revive such creatures only to wall them off from the world now, would it? So in order to keep everyone safe until something could be done, Darunia himself caused the landslide that left the boulder blocking the way to the cavern. Everyone assumed that Ganondorf had done it and were trying to find a solution. Darunia walled himself off in his room to stall the Gorons from opening up again, at least until he could think of a plan. He was certain that the Dodongos were too dangerous for the Gorons to take on alone without the help from the royal army, but Leonis never replied to his messages. It was a desperate situation. Fortunately, he had me to keep his secrets and to help him out. Like I said, no dungeon, no maps, no puzzles. The only thing here was one dead Dodongo skeleton and a lot of living Dodongo spawn, among other things. The thing about Dodongos, their babies start out small and relatively inoffensive and nearly harmless. One might also think that they're cute, but they can be pretty aggressive and dangerous in great numbers. And they have a tendency to explode when injured. This was the first real evidence that Ganondorf was behind all of this. The Lizalfos. Highly dangerous, highly intelligent lizard creatures. Highly aggressive and skilled with swords. Ganondorf had left them in charge of operations down here. They were the guards of the cavern, sent to make sure that the Dodongos increased in number. Even I was surprised that I was able to take them down. Of course, I didn't kill them, not yet. All I could manage to do was get these two to retreat. I wouldn't kill them until I encountered them again later. When Dodongos mature past their larval stage, they develop forelimbs and tougher hides. They're usually invulnerable to swords at this point, and worse, they develop the ability to breathe fire. At this point in their life cycle, the only vulnerability that they have is their tails. They make for good stew, I hear, if you can detach one of them, still intact that is. Armos. Highly dangerous and highly secretive enemies. I didn't encounter any of them here, but they would soon present themselves anyway. Like most things I found, this was not buried in a chest. It was abandoned, left behind by the Goron miners when they had to abandon the quarry. It was already quite old, considering that it was fashioned from a Dodongo's stomach. But then again, I find it to be highly suspect of how much the Goron fabrics and items were fashioned from Dodongo hides. Regarding how the Dodongos breed, they tend to work sort of like a lion's pride, with one male being the largest and strongest of them becoming the alpha of the clan. A king, you might say. This one usually commands a harem of females, and he protects the clan with fierce jealousy and aggression. But if you take out the big one, the rest can easily be taken down. I would have liked to have had a level head at the time I saw this creature, but needless to say, this thing intimidated me far worse than Goma did. Here I was, face to face with a fire-breathing dragon that was nearly 5 times larger than any of the ones I had seen before. I soon realized at this point my sword did absolutely nothing. If it wasn't for Epona allowing me to quickly move about the cavern to avoid his attacks, I probably wouldn't have been able to spot his weakness. Making him swallow a bomb or two every time he opened the big mouth of his broke off sectional armor, leaving him vulnerable to attack. was finished. And that is how I slew my first dragon. The way the situation really went was that when Darunia had heard I had blown open the entrance to Dodongo's cavern, he immediately gathered a posse of Gorons to come after me, thinking he'd be saving my life. But when he saw me combating King Dodongo and managing to stay alive, he and the other Gorons were impressed. I was taking on a gigantic fire-breathing dinosaur like it was nothing. And when it was all over, and they saw that I had won, they were astounded. It was only a simple matter of storming the cavern to finish off all of the nests. When I had gotten out of there, Darunia was the first to congratulate me. I could still remember the headache. Luckily, my face cushioned the impact when I hit the ground. After that, things were good between me and Darunia. He calls us sworn brothers, but regarded me with more of a paternal attitude. I didn't mind. It was welcome to have someone tough, yet boisterously cheerful for a friend. And from that moment on, I was a hero among the Gorons. And just like that, I had 2 spiritual stones and only 1 left to get. Like I mentioned before, scaling Death Mountain should have been safe. Imagine my surprise when the volcano started erupting. Not a full-on eruption, but enough to send some burning hot rocks into the sky. It was a sign that the forces protecting this world were starting to weaken. The first time I ever summoned a great fairy from her fountain, I didn't know what to expect, and needless to say, I was a bit overwhelmed when she made her appearance. The great fairies are the closest thing that we have to demigods in the land of Hyrule, and we interact with them on a fairly regular basis. I felt honored that she appeared before me. I was overwhelmed by her boisterous, over-the-top personality, her incredible size, as well as her beauty. A lot of people have this opinion that the great fairies of this game are a bit creepy. Well, much like most of the other opinions, I feel like that's a little bit over-exaggerated. Come on, guys, just grow up. Full disclosure here, she did not teach me the Kaiten Giri. I did learn it from a great fairy, but not this one, and certainly not here. You guys don't need the full details, at least not yet, but what you guys do need to know is that when I woke up after it happened, I just knew it. Something in me just knew how to do the spin attack almost on instinct. I had no idea where it came from at the time. Anyways, after everything that had happened, freeing the Gorons from the Dodongo Plague, getting the Spiritual Stone of Fire, getting stronger thanks to the Great Fairy, I figured that I had earned some rewards and comforts. After a day of revels with the Gorons, I decided to head down the mountain, where I crashed at Impa's old place. And that night, that was when it happened. Ugh.